Welcome to Retirement GPS, navigated by Zenergy, your roadmap to a secure and confident retirement. Each week, we explore strategies, stories, and planning frameworks designed to help you navigate the complexities of life after work. From tax planning to investments, income strategies to risk management, our goal is to give you the clarity and confidence you need to make informed decisions. But retirement isn't just about the numbers. It's also about lifestyle, purpose, and peace of mind. We're here to guide you through both the financial details and the personal dimensions of this next chapter. Let's chart today's course.
Welcome back to episode 40 of our Retirement GPS podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Zaharchik, certified financial planner and president of Zenergy Retirement Planning.
And I'm your co-host, Zane Belsack, associate planner here at Zenergy.
We have a great topic today. We're going to be really diving into what does it take to retire with $5 million in investable assets? What does it look like? What are the concerns, the risks that we want to be careful of? And what are the avenues and opportunities available to us? So we're going to take $5 million in investable assets and put it in the context of our 10 components of Retirement GPS, the planning system that we use here at Zenergy to ensure that our people have a comfortable retirement. So we're going to plug that number in. We're going to take it step by step, look at all 10 components, and figure out what is going to provide you with the retirement of your dreams. And we're going to start with our very first component, which is goal setting.
Goal setting is really important, especially when you're planning for retirement, looking at your short term, which is 1 year or less, your midterm, which is 1 to 5 years, and your long term, which is 5 years plus. Planning for all of these different types of goals are really important for any asset level. Some common goals at this level are obviously retirement. Hopefully you're either retired or looking to retire. Obviously that's based on everyone's life goals, what you want to do. Maybe you want to work longer. Maybe you hate your job and you want to work a lot less. We often see individuals traveling more often once you retire. That's something that a lot of people like to do, the go-go years of your retirement. Taking those big one-off trips to your African safari or spending some extended time overseas, that's always a great goal to make in retirement. Maintaining or buying a second home is also something to consider. Do I want a snowbird, which means do I want to live down south during the winter and move up north in the summer? What does my retirement look like for me living-wise? Helping children or grandchildren is also something that we typically see with this type of asset level, and that includes things like charitable giving. Because of the investable assets, it's something that we really want to keep in mind, and it answers a lot of questions that a lot of people have, which is, where exactly can I put my money to better my community? And really that leads me into my last point, which is leaving a legacy, because that's so important to any individual, no matter what age and what investable assets you're at.
We want to make sure that our goals drive our plan, because that's where we start. It's why we start there, because our strategies are really dependent on what your goals are and what your priorities are. So let's dive into our second component, which is budgeting and cash flow. So when we're looking at budgeting and cash flows, typically in retirement, living off of your investable assets, we have a safe distribution rate. We kind of have two ways to do it. The safe distribution rate, the way we like to go, which is a cost of living adjustment based off of a safe distribution rate over time, is 4 to 5%. All right. The other way that we typically will recommend for people that want to spend a little bit more earlier in retirement is what we call our guardrail strategy, and we'll get to that in a moment. But living off of 4 to 5% means effectively, if you're drawing 4%, you're almost 100% sure over the course of history, 150 years worth of history, that you'll live a comfortable 30-year retirement, even if you increase it each year, your distribution rate to inflation. 5% is a very high probability as well. I think it's something like 97, 98% probability that you're going to live comfortably through retirement, again, increasing each year with a cost of living adjustment. $5 million supports anywhere from $200,000 to $250,000 a year at those levels of gross income. We're going to remember that this is gross income because a lot of people are drawing from pre-tax accounts, so taxes will be withheld. So just understand that's going to be gross income from your portfolio. The great thing is, though, that is only distributions from your investable assets. There are other income sources that you'll have, theoretically, for most people. First one is Social Security. Most people we work with are eligible for Social Security, so they have Social Security income, which we'll talk about later on how to maximize that. We also have pensions and annuities, which are less common today, but still we'll see it where somebody has a pension or an annuity that they're going to be living off of and drawing from over time. And if you're looking at a monthly income from your portfolio, you take that 250,000, divide it by 12, you're looking at anywhere from 16,700 to 20,800 per month in gross income, which is a nice chunk of change, a comfortable retirement, even if you're here in the Northeast where costs are a little bit more. But boy, if you take that type of income and move down south or move to a lower cost state, you're really going to have a very nice lifestyle. And it gives you that flexibility to do the things you want to do, such as travel or spend more time with your family and take them on trips, that sort of thing. We also want to give the opportunity for someone to draw a little bit more. We do have a period where sometimes people retire and they say for the first 10 years they want to draw a little bit more. They're not as concerned about either the back years when they know that maybe they're not going to have the health to do the things they want to do, or they're not necessarily concerned about market volatility. We actually put a guardrail strategy in place there, which allows for a 6% distribution rate. And with a $5 million portfolio, that is pretty significant. That's a $300,000 annual distribution rate that you're able to draw. The challenge there is, number one, you don't get an automatic cost of living adjustment, which means if costs are going up, your income will not go up. Now, you may say, I don't care because I'm getting a lot more money each year. And you're right about that. You are getting a lot more money. So maybe you don't care about costs going up. But we do allow for a couple of guardrails here. The first one is on the downside. If the portfolio falls more than 20%, and in a $5 million portfolio, you got to be careful because that's down to $4 million or less. We're going to cut your income by 10%. All right, so your income goes from $300,000 to $270,000. You do not get a cost of living adjustment, i.e. your income does not go up unless your portfolio then grows by more than 20%. So if it grows from $5 million to $6 million, now you can adjust 10% higher and take $330,000 a year. So that's really how the inflation adjustment works. If the portfolio is growing, you'll get an inflation adjustment. And if the portfolio falls, you actually get less money. And for us, that's not terribly palatable. For most people we work with, they don't want that. They don't want the uncertainty of income. They want the certainty of income. However, if you're really concerned about higher income, especially in those early years of retirement, it's a great way to do it and protect your portfolio so that over time it doesn't run out because we're cutting as it's falling. Now, along with cash flow is your budgeting. And frankly, we don't really care. If you don't budget at this level of income, that's up to you. What we want to know is that you're not taking more than your safe distribution rates. And that's really what we gauge things off of. But some people in retirement like to budget. They want to make sure they're keeping their spending on track. And we do recommend a great app for that called Rocket Money, which is an aggregator and a budgeting app that I use personally. And when you link all your accounts, your credit cards and your bank accounts, what happens is it tracks all your spending automatically. It imports that data. You categorize it. Most of the time it categorizes automatically, but you just check the categories, make sure that they're right. And then you get a really good sense, very accurate numbers on what you spend on groceries and what you spend on restaurants without really doing a whole lot of legwork. It's a really great tool for budgeting. But like I said, the goal here is to just live within your means. We don't necessarily care if you know exactly how much you spend on dining out versus vacations versus charitable giving. All right, let's look at emergency reserves. Now we're going to talk about how much cash do we keep in hand in case there's an emergency. We'll define an emergency as a big expense that we did not expect. Also a major market correction or really terrible economy that we may need to draw some safe money from. Our rough framework here for emergency reserves is we like to see 4% in cash in the bank. So at $5 million, that's about $200,000 sitting in cash in the bank. The way I would like you to set that up, and the way I set it up personally for myself, is a percentage of that is in your checking account as a buffer, and then the remainder is in a high yield savings account. So that could be something like keeping $20,000 in your checking account just to have a buffer so you can pay your bills, write your checks, you don't have to worry about it. And then $180,000 in a easily accessible high yield savings account, earning in today's world 3.5% would be great. And that $180,000 is actually earning some really nice interest. Then we want to have another 4% in our portfolio, which would have safe assets. So that 4% would be something like treasury bills. In our portfolios, we have a treasury bill fund. So the SCHO, which has short-term treasury bills, earns, again, a nice interest rate, but very little volatility to it. So we know it's safe when markets are going through turmoil. We know that's money that is there that we can draw off of to live. So it gives us roughly $400,000 in our liquidity. And that purpose is, again, protect us through downturns, which is what keeps us up at night. Like, we don't want a retiree worrying about where they're going to get their next meal from. We know we've got, in the case of 4 to 5% distribution rate, we have roughly 2 years worth of distributions in cash, ready to go to survive short-term bear markets. Also, prevent forced selling if you do have a one-off expense that we didn't expect. Let's just say the roof comes due and you didn't expect it, and for some reason now you need a new roof. Maybe a tree fell through it. I don't know. And that's a big expense. That could be $30,000. Instead of going in and selling stocks when they're down, we've got our emergency reserve that we can use to pay for that roof and allow the stocks to do what they do over a long period of time. And then, of course, smooth retirement income. There may be a situation where we actually want to be really tax efficient for this year. So we could draw from savings, we can draw from emergency reserves as opposed to drawing from IRAs, so that we can do a Roth conversion or some of our other tax strategies that we want to do, that it allows for that type of thing, which is fantastic. Asset allocation, number 4, it's a big one, right? Everybody comes to us and says, I want to make money on my money. I want to invest. Asset allocation, in this case, really, even with $5 million, it still depends on our 4 components of asset allocation. The first one is age. What age are you at from the standpoint of how close are we to retirement? There's a big difference if you're 60 years old and in retirement versus 60 years old and not in retirement. So we do invest differently based on those criteria, but age is important. Next is risk tolerance. How comfortable am I with market volatility? We want to make sure that we're considering that when deciding on your appropriate portfolio. Also, your goals, right? If I'm 60 and I'm not retiring till 75, my goals are very different than someone who's 60 and is currently retired. So we're going to have a different portfolio for those two people. So setting those goals and maintaining them is really important. And then, of course, time horizon, which dives into all of these things. If I have an investment portfolio that I'm going to use to buy a second home in 2 years, that's going to be invested very differently from a portfolio that's used to provide a stream of income for the next 30 years. So we want to make sure that we have those laid out and we're comfortable with them. That's why each of our portfolios is customized. Yes, we start with a template based off of age, but we work customization based off of the other criteria.
And I've seen a lot of examples of that, even in an 80 or 90-year-old investing very aggressively because she's planning on giving her money to her kid.
That's absolutely true. And just because you're older doesn't mean you have to be ultra conservative. If your goals are, I don't need this money, I want to invest it for my 40-year-old grandchild, then guess what? We can invest a 90-year-old's money like they were 40. It's a really good point, and those are the things that we think about when we're looking at goals and time horizons. So the main priorities here are diversification is the number one highest priority. Rate of return is important, of course, and everybody's going to talk about rate of return. People talk about, I don't understand why I'm underperforming the S&P 500, but first and foremost is risk management. You have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. We need to manage the risk here. We need to manage the volatility. So return is important, but it's second to diversification of risk management. Next is rebalancing. We want to make sure that we're constantly staying on top of rebalancing our portfolio. We did a whole podcast on this, so if you haven't heard that, go back and listen. It's really important to understand how rebalancing works and why it's important in your portfolio. And the simple example is if I have a 50% stock portfolio and a 50% bond portfolio, if stocks are up for 5-6 years in a row, multiple double-digit rates of return, and bonds are treading water and not doing much, all of a sudden my portfolio might be 90% stocks and 10% bonds. And that's not what I originally intended. It's not where I should be based off of my criteria. And if I don't rebalance, sell those stocks while they're up and buy bonds, I'm going to be in big trouble if there's a market correction. So what we tend to do is say we rebalance based off drift. If our portfolio drifts too far from our allocation that we target, then we just run a rebalance. So we'll sell some stocks, buy some bonds, sell high, buy low. I know it sounds crazy. People don't want to buy low and sell high. They want to sell low and buy high because something's doing well. They just want to buy more of it. But that's typically the opposite of what you want to do. And then, of course, income stability and tax efficiency. That's how we want to think about our portfolios. Making sure our investment allocation provides that income stability for us and is as tax efficient as possible. Volatility should be managed, but not eliminated. You can eliminate volatility from your portfolio, but you will sacrifice return. You will sacrifice the things that you're trying to accomplish, which is income for the rest of your life that grows with inflation. So that's what we want to be careful of. We don't want to sacrifice that simply because we want to eliminate volatility.
It's like the difference between investing in a savings account compared to going to Vegas and betting it all on black.
That's true, and I don't want to compare a diversified portfolio to betting it on black, but I would call those extreme examples.
Exactly. Yep.
Sure. All right, let's take a look at number 5, retirement planning and distributions. We've already talked about our 4 to 5% rate. So retirement planning at that 4 to 5% rate is important to understand. $200,000 annually. At the 4% rate, 5% is $250,000 annually. Use Social Security strategically. We didn't talk a lot about Social Security here, but we do want to spend a little bit of time. We did a whole podcast on Social Security, so please go back and listen to that. If you're single, your guess is as good as mine. As we've talked about, we do not know when you're going to die, so that's a variable we don't have. And if we don't have that variable, we can't do the math. I just don't know how long you're going to be collecting Social Security. All we can use are expectations, probabilities, assumptions in order to make a good Social Security strategy and put it in place. So what we typically say is if you're single, collecting at full retirement age seems right as long as you're in good health and financially you can support it through other means. You can support your retirement through other means. And also, that the economy, that the markets are doing fairly well, fairly stable. If you're married, we typically have a strategy where we want the largest beneficiary, the person with the largest benefit, to delay till age 70, because your benefit keeps growing until age 70. And the person with the smaller benefit collect at full retirement age, which is 67. And what that means is if I've got the largest benefit and I delay till 70 and I pass away at 71, but my spouse is 2 years younger than me, gets my benefit at 68 and then lives to 94, that benefit, my large benefit, which they now receive when I pass away, is going to live a lot longer than I do. And it's going to be far more beneficial to delay it and let it grow because the break-even point there is about 16 years. That's what we tend to look at, but like I said, there's a lot of variables there, and that's where rules of thumb can get you in trouble, right? You need to look at what is your health situation. If you've been battling two of the big ones, cancer or heart disease, you've had a triple bypass, or you were in for cancer treatment, those are two things that really would put a damper on our strategy and really would affect how we would plan. So each planning in this case can be individualized. Next thing for retirement planning is looking at your RMDs, required minimum distributions. They occur when you turn between 73 and 75 for your retirement accounts, your pre-tax retirement accounts, not Roth accounts, but pre-tax accounts. So it could be your 401k, it could be your IRA. Based on your date of birth, it's either 73 to 75, and you have to draw that first year roughly 4%, anywhere from 3.77 to 4.07, depending on 73 to 75. And that increases each year because your required minimum distribution from that IRA is based on your life expectancy. It is also based on the account balance on December 31st of the prior year. Each year you have to take a certain amount of money out whether you need it or not. And it can affect a lot of things. It can affect your tax bracket, of course. It can affect your ability to get certain deductions or certain tax benefits below income thresholds. And of course, it can affect Medicare premiums. We have what's called IRMAs. If you earn too much money, you pay more Medicare premiums on the health insurance you're already getting. So we want to manage that, make sure that we're aware of that. So creating a distribution strategy to account for all of that, it can be tricky. You have different types of accounts, pre-tax accounts, taxable brokerage accounts. You have savings. You hopefully have some Roth IRAs. Where do we pull and when do we pull it is really tricky, and that's really where some of the value comes in retirement planning. Here at Zenergy, especially in the state of New Jersey, we will like to keep people's taxable income below $150,000 or less. There's a few thresholds that $150,000 affects. In New Jersey, is the senior property tax freeze is one of those thresholds. We also have the new senior deduction, which is $6,000 per individual 65 or older in the household. So a married couple, it's $12,000. That phases out over $150,000 in income. And of course, we want to be sensitive to those IRMAs and the other tax brackets that we're looking at. So if we can keep taxable income, meaning you can live off $300,000, but because of how you're drawing it, the taxable income is only $150,000. Then because some of it's coming from Roths or some of it's coming from savings, we can really manage and take advantage of those tax strategies.
That 150 is really just a golden number in tax land, isn't it?
It's become, yeah, we actually never really focused too much on it, but now with the New Jersey senior freeze and the senior deduction, both land at $150,000, it's really become how can we keep people under $150,000 here in New Jersey.
And it's funny, it seems like it's a good problem to have such a big IRA and be forced to take money out, but it does, as you were saying, it does potentially lead to some issues down the line.
Yeah, for sure. And we're very fortunate here in financial planning. We're not dealing with really big societal problems. We're dealing with good problems to have pretty much across the board.
I'd love to have that problem.
How do we manage this great problem that we have, which is too much income, right? Although they are good problems to have, they're problems nonetheless. So we manage them and we talk about them to try to optimize the best strategies for those. Now we're going to talk about risk management, which is number 6, because sometimes there are problems that are not good problems to have, and that's where our risk comes in. Life insurance is a good example. When you hit retirement or you're at a point where you have that $5 million net worth, you're probably at a point where you don't need life insurance anymore. In most cases, you don't have any estate tax. Federal government exemption is $30 million for a married couple, $15 million for a single person. If you have $5 million in investable assets, it's a stretch to think that you've got more than those thresholds in other type of assets, which means you probably don't have any estate tax. You no longer have dependents, most likely at this stage, where you've got to take care of them. Now, if you do have children and you have over $5 million and you want to retire, then life insurance may still be a good thing to have for you. But we're assuming at this point children are grown and out of the house and essentially independent. So you're really just taking care of your spouse. And if something were to happen to you and you're both retired, your spouse should have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. There really should not be a need for life insurance. There are a few cases where life insurance can be really valuable, even for retired people with a high net worth. Number one, if you do tip over those thresholds where estate tax is a concern, or if you're in a state where you're planning to leave some money to nephews, nieces, sisters, people that are not Class A beneficiaries and may have a significant death tax associated with them, you might want insurance to cover that tax. That's up to you. The other case would be the owner of a really closely held business. If you have significant ownership in a very valuable business and that business is going to pass to someone else, you might want to make sure that there's life insurance there as key man insurance within the business to allow the business to continue continuity planning for the business. But then also it might trigger an estate tax as well. So we want to look for that. Next insurance we want to talk about is healthcare. This is, of course, the one that everybody thinks about. And in the case of retirees, typically people 65 and older is who we're talking to, which means Medicare comes into play. Now, obviously, if you're not 65 yet, then you have to go buy private insurance. And that can be very expensive, especially in your early 60s, but it's one of those expenses you just can't avoid. But when you hit 65, Medicare comes into play. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. Again, we've done a prior podcast on Medicare, but look for Part A is free at 65. Nothing you even need to do, but you'll get Part A automatically. That's your emergency care. Part B is your sort of maintenance care. So going to your doctor, getting your checkup. That does have a premium associated with it, and that is where IRMAs come into play. Part D is your drug plan and also has a premium associated with it with IRMAs. So we want to be sensitive to that, but that's going to pay for your drugs. And then, of course, there's a supplement plan, a Medicare supplement program, often called a Medigap plan, which will fill in the holes, that things that Medicare doesn't cover. It'll help pay for and fill in those gaps. It's important to remember, though, once you're on Medicare, things that are not covered are dental. So dental insurance would be something separate you'd have to purchase if you want insurance. Eye care, so glasses, contacts, anything you might need for your eyes. And then hearing. So hearing aids and that sort of thing are not covered. You can get separate insurance for that if you'd like, or you could just pay out of pocket at $5 million in investable assets. Probably best to just pay out of pocket. You're probably not going to beat the insurance company, I don't think. And then the last thing to consider, if you are traveling internationally, Medicare does not cover that. You do probably want to get travel insurance when you travel, which will include medical insurance. So if you're traveling internationally and you get hurt, you go to a hospital, you're not going to get a $10,000 bill.
Especially in retirement, when you're most likely traveling in those go-go years, I think that's really important.
Absolutely, and that is where people spend a lot of their time internationally. Having that insurance, having that travel insurance is a big help. Next, long-term care. If you are already retired in your mid to late 60s or 70s, my guess is you're probably not even eligible for long-term care insurance. So you go price it out. You're either going to pay a small fortune or just, when I say a small fortune, potentially up to $10,000 a person or per year, or just not even be eligible for it because of pre-existing health issues or just your age. But we tend to not recommend long-term care insurance, especially with people with $5 million in investable assets. Go through some quick numbers with you. The chances that you're going to go into a long-term care facility or need long-term care aid, meaning having help in the house, the chance you're going to pass away within 3 years is about an 80% chance. The chance you're going to pass away within 5 years is about a 98% chance, which means our outside risk here is that you're going to go to a facility, have to pay for it for about 5 years, right? We use $10,000 as the number here in New Jersey. It might be a little more, it might be a little less, whether you want a nice facility or a less nice facility. But $10,000 is a good average number to work from. At 5 years, that's about $600,000 is your liability. You have $5 million. That's something that you can cover out of pocket. You're not going to be worried about bankrupting your spouse or using all of your assets that your children and grandchildren aren't going to get it, that the legacy is not there. We call it self-insuring. You have the funds to self-insure. The other option, of course, is to, if you are eligible, go out and get a long-term care insurance policy or some sort of hybrid whole life policy with a long-term care rider. The problem there is you're going to pay a significant premium. So if you're killed in a car accident at 90 years old or drop dead of a heart attack at 95, you're going to pay premiums for 20 or 30 years, probably to the tune of a couple $100,000 of those premiums, and really have nothing to show for it. If it's a hybrid life policy, you'll have a life insurance associated with it, but again, the premiums are going to be substantially higher. Let's take a look at property casualty. So home, auto, and umbrella. Home and auto, pretty straightforward. Just make sure that you have full coverage. Talk to your agent. Make sure you've got what you need. Umbrella, we don't think that you need to cover your entire net worth with an umbrella policy. For those of you who don't know what umbrella policy is, effectively it's a liability policy that goes on top of your auto or your home policy. So if you're driving a car or if somebody is at your house and is hurt, right? If it's your fault because you're driving a car and you hit somebody, or if somebody's at your house and they hurt themselves and or God forbid, kill themselves, you're liable. That's where your homeowner and auto policy comes into play to cover that. It only covers a certain amount. Most people have between $500,000 and $1 million in liability, both on their homeowners and their auto. Umbrella could be $2, $3, $4 million on top of that. So if you have $1 million in liability policy and you get a $3 million umbrella policy, you now have $4 million in liability. So we typically recommend that level. If you have $5 million investable assets, something like $3 million is sufficient, because you still have $4 million in total liability protection. You're only on the hook for every dime over $4 million. And I'm trying to think of a liability concern that would cause a judge to award somebody $10 million or something like that.
Yeah, you would have had done something really bad.
Really bad. Yeah, because even the loss of a life tends not to warrant more than, say, $1 million judgment unless there's great neglect there and they want to punish the homeowner who's been warned time and time again. As an example, should have been like they have a Rottweiler and they let the Rottweiler loose and attacked and killed a kid, and they were warned time and time again about the dog and that it bit people and they didn't do anything about it. Those are examples of just gross negligence that would trigger huge claims. Assuming that doesn't happen, you're probably not looking at those type of large claims. All right, number 7, let's move on to tax planning. At $5 million in investable assets, tax planning is so key. It really is. I hesitate to say it's the most important of the 10 components, but it's very important. It's very high up there. And the reason why is because it can be highly leveraged. We can highly leverage our tax planning. If you have $500,000 investable assets and $100,000 in income, tax planning does move the needle a little bit, but you're not going to save yourself tons and tons of money. With $5 million in investable assets, there's a lot of leverage that we can use in good tax strategy to save you a lot of money. First strategy that we talk about all the time is making sure that you have investment account tax diversification. What does that mean? Having pre-tax IRAs, Roth IRAs, taxable brokerage account, having savings, different places where you can pull from that will trigger taxes or not trigger taxes depending on the situation, right? So we know if we pull from a pre-tax 401k or IRA, it's going to be taxed as ordinary income in that year. Now, that can be great and that can be terrible depending on your situation. If you're in the 0% bracket, why do we care? Why do we care if it's pre-tax? Pull is
great.
Everything within that 0% bracket that we can pull, right? We know the standard deduction now is pretty significant. So why not pull as much as we can within that standard deduction at the low tax buckets from pre-tax accounts? If we're living off of a much higher income level, as we would be at the $5 million level, anything from $200,000 to $300,000, purely from the investment accounts, right? That's the numbers that we came up with when we talked about it earlier. If you're living from $200,000 to $300,000 plus Social Security, possibly pensions or annuities, you're going to be up in a higher bracket. So if we can pull some of that money from Roth IRAs or from taxable savings, it gives us the flexibility to, again, live off $300,000, $400,000 or more, but have much lower taxable income that's recognized on your tax returns. We like to recommend ideally 2/3 of our retirement accounts to be Roth IRAs and 1/3 to be pre-tax. Again, we do want some pre-tax to fill those lower tax buckets, but we want most of our money to be Roth. Now, you may be retiring with a $3 million pre-tax 401k or IRA and say, wow, how am I supposed to go 2/3, 1/3? And the answer is you're not. You probably won't get there. That is a target. It is a goal. It is not something that we say you absolutely have to get there. We'll work to try to convert at the low brackets if we can. But if you have $5 million and you're living off $300 a year and $3 million of it is in a pre-tax account, there may not be much we can do. We may do small conversions and get a few $100,000 converted, but it's going to be relatively minor. You don't want to convert at high brackets, regardless of what somebody may tell you. It is very expensive to do. The Roth conversion strategy is really the way that we affect that, where we get there. The next tax strategy is tax loss harvesting, which is a relatively simple strategy. At the end of the year, we do it for all of our taxable investment accounts. Certainly not something you would do in an IRA, but if you have a taxable brokerage account and you have a diversified portfolio and something in that portfolio by the end of the year is actually losing money, it's down money, you can sell that and buy something relatively comparable. Can't be identical, can't buy the same fund back because you get hit by the wash sale rule. The IRS says, no, can't do it within 30 days. Yeah, they call that cheating. And they say, no, you sold it and then bought it right back. The wash sale comes into play and you don't recognize those losses. But by selling something, and I'm going to use the example here that we talk about a lot, which is our bond fund, right? If bonds are down and we're losing money in our bond funds because interest rates have risen, we will sell our total bond market index fund, right? And then we'll go buy like a 10-year treasury fund. They are two different bond funds. They materially have different risks, but just slightly different. The IRS does recognize them as different, but for our purposes, they're materially the same. And we're able to recognize the loss in that tax year in December by tax loss harvesting those losses, offsetting either gains or just ordinary income. And then 30 days after the wash sale rule expires, we can go back, sell our treasury bond fund, and go buy our total bond market index again. So we're back to where we were. So all we're doing is recognizing losses in specific years, which can really add up, especially when you're dealing with large capital gains or even just large income. You can offset $3,000 a year of losses. Tax diversification across account types is something that we will look at as well, especially dealing with a $5 million account. You may want to have your Roth accounts have the more aggressive portfolio, right? Because these are accounts you may not be touching for a while. These are the accounts that are going to grow tax-free, so you want them to grow aggressively. Income-producing assets such as bonds or high dividend stocks, you may want to have not in a taxable investment account, but in a pre-tax account. Because they don't grow as quickly, they shoot off income, and a pre-tax account allows that income to just accumulate and not trigger taxes annually when it's paid. Next tax strategy is our donor advised fund. This is a great tax strategy for people that want to make charitable donations. If you're making a charitable donation or significant donations every year, let's just say you're making $5,000 in charitable donations each year, and you want to take the tax deduction on those, but you're limited because you're taking the standard deduction, so you can only deduct $2,000 of it. What we do is we bundle it, and we say instead of making $5,000 a year, why don't we take $50,000 now, make 10 years worth of donations to a donor advised fund. The money will sit there, we'll still have control over it, and we can donate $5,000 a year for the next 10 years, but recognize all $50,000 in donations today. Really valuable tool because it allows us to reduce our income all at once, maximize just about 100% of our charitable donations, and then use those deductions to potentially do other things. We may want to do a Roth conversion of $50,000 to offset the loss that we had there in our deduction. So it gives us a lot of flexibility to do a lot of things. Donor advised funds are really valuable if you are charitably inclined. Qualified charitable distributions are also a great charitable tool. It allows us to take our required minimum distributions and donate those directly to charity, especially if we don't want them or need them. So instead of recognizing the income from our IRAs and then paying the tax and then making a charitable donation that may have a tax deduction and may not, depending on how big the donation is, we can make the donation right from the IRA. We simply write a check, call it a QCD, and we get 100% write-off. So it's a really valuable tool. And then another charitable benefit for tax strategies is donating highly appreciated assets. A lot of times we have people that have worked for big companies, Johnson & Johnson or Home Depot, and they've worked there their whole career and they've accumulated a ton of stock through their DRIP program, through their regular purchase program. And over time, they've got all this stock that has grown significantly. Instead of just liquidating that stock and triggering those gains, they can donate that stock directly to charity in small chunks. You might want to donate $1,000 at a time. And the great thing is all those gains now are gone. You don't have to pay the tax on those gains, and you get the charitable write-off that you're entitled to for that donation. So these are really some great tax strategies. And with $5 million in investable assets, these are strategies that you should be looking at because, like I said, leveraging those tax strategies and its tax savings can be really valuable.
Oh, I agree, especially if you're looking to do something like a Roth to try and get to that 2/3, 1/3, or even if income is high, and you're already planning on making charitable donations. Something like a donor advised fund or a QCD is
really important. And they can feel complicated, so a lot of people just don't understand them. They don't even know about them, but they are part of our regular tax repertoire here at Zenergy. All right, let's move on to estate planning. So number 8, making sure that your legacy is intact and your assets pass as smoothly, as efficiently, as cost effectively as possible to your heirs. So the core documents that we want to see in place here is your will, your living will, your power of attorney, and possibly a trust. Trust is not a given. A lot of people come to us and say, oh, my friend has a trust, I need a trust. And I'll say, tell me about your friend. And it turns out their friend lives in a different state, has a totally different net worth system, and has different concerns than they do, different goals than they do. Trusts are really not necessary in some states and very important in others. So it's important to understand the nuances of a trust. But I don't want to get too far off track here. Let me digress a bit and go back to talking about the core documents. A will, extremely important. A will is a document that basically says who's in charge of distributing your assets when you pass and who gets those assets. So by defining an executor and naming an executor in your will, you're giving this person the power to distribute their assets the way you're dictating in that will. And that's really important. Now, not all of your assets will pass through your will. A lot of assets, such as retirement accounts, such as insurances, will pass through a beneficiary. And if we make sure our beneficiaries are in place, if we put payable on death on our checking and savings accounts, those don't go through a will. However, we want to make sure that we have a will for all the other things, such as our car, our personal assets, anything that doesn't have a beneficiary on it. A will is really important for that purpose.
And making sure that they're updated is also very important. I've seen that time and time again.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Keeping it up to date is important. Not only your wishes may not have changed in the last 20 years, but the rules and the laws may have changed dramatically. And not running it by an attorney or having it updated and redone is a big mistake that we see. Living will. It's your will for while you're living for your health. And it's where you name your healthcare proxy, which is the person that you want making decisions on your health while you're incapacitated. And also laying out the way you want that healthcare proxy to make decisions. When do I want them to pull the plug? When do I want them to not pull the plug? How do I want them to think about the decisions so that they can make good decisions with my values communicated to them through that living will? It's really an important document that we have in place. Then there's a power of attorney, which is while you're living for your financial situation. So if you are incapacitated, it gives a power of attorney the ability to move your money, access your money, pay your bills, make sure that your house isn't repossessed because you haven't paid your bills because you've been in a coma for 3 months. Power of attorney can be a really valuable financial tool for while you're living. And then lastly, we already talked about trust. Trust may or may not be relevant. There are different types of trust. It's a little bit outside of the scope of what we want to talk about in this podcast. We will dive into trust in future podcasts. I don't think we've done a podcast on trust, have we?
We have not.
No, That's a good one. All right, make a note of that. We'll do a future podcast on trust to make sure that you understand the different types of trust and when you would want to trust and when you wouldn't want to trust. But most people come to us thinking like, I have a lot of money, I need a trust. And that's just not the case typically. There are definitely great places where trusts come in really handy and places where it's just not necessary. So we'll talk about that in a future podcast. But for your estate planning, for your legacy, focus on simplicity, making sure that you've got the things in place that you need to have and that it's all laid out the way you want it. Once we have the documents in place, we need to make sure that our accounts and our assets are properly titled to reflect that. If we do have a trust, because it's right for us, we need to make sure that trust is filled, meaning it is supported. Assets are placed into that trust, which means we got to change titling. If we have assets that are going to pass outside of our will, make sure that the beneficiaries are properly titled. So having that in place is really important. And make sure that we're coordinating the beneficiaries on an IRA is also coordinated with what's in our will. Legacy planning becomes more and more powerful. At this level, it's really important. You've worked really hard. You've hit a huge milestone of hitting $5 million in investable assets. So we don't want to make a mistake that's going to cost us a large chunk of that and affect future generations. Next topic is our education and family planning. Relatively minor topic here. It is important, especially if we're planning for younger people. When it comes to people in retirement, saving for children or grandchild's education, not that it's not important. A lot of people have grandchildren. They want to make sure they're saving in a 529 for, but children tend to be grown and out of the house, typically done with their education at this point. The important thing to remember, and a 529 comes in really handy here, especially if you're saving for your grandchild's education. Important thing to remember here is, number one, make sure that the 529 is in your name as the grandparent with the grandchild as the beneficiary of that account. And the reason why I say that is a lot of people will gift the money to their children. I'm going to gift it to my daughter for my granddaughter, and she can save it in her 529 so she knows how much is there. I'm all for communicating what you're saving to your child, but make sure it stays in your name. And the reason is that if a 529 is in your name and not your child's name, when your child goes apply for FAFSA for their child, for your granddaughter, they are not going to have your 529 counted on that FAFSA form, so it won't affect financial aid in any way, shape, or form. It's a little known nuance that a lot of people just don't understand, and it can be really valuable later on and down the road when they're filling out those FAFSA forms. You can give up to $19,000 per person if you want to be giving. Gifting at this level is pretty common. We do see people that do want to gift to their children or grandchildren, whether it be for education or for other reasons. I'm not opposed to it. I think it's fine. There is no really estate planning reason to gift unless your net worth is more than $15 million for a single or $30 million for a married couple. So I wouldn't get too crazy about it. But if you want to gift because you want to see your family enjoy it while they're living, or you want to help save for education or for a wedding, then this is the time to do it. Like I said, $19,000 per person per year. If you're married, you can give $38,000 to your child or grandchild because $19,000 from each of you. Things to think about. Remember though, generosity, which is always fantastic, should really never compromise your longevity. We want to make sure that your $5 million continues to grow so you can keep up with cost of living over time. If you do want to gift because you're just not spending anywhere near the amount of money that you're able to spend on an annual basis, gifting is a nice way to use it. Feel free to do so. Let's dive into our last topic, which is retirement, lifestyle, and happiness. This is the easy part, right? The first 9 things, we're getting your finances in place, making sure that we're optimizing what we have. We're not paying Uncle Sam. We're leaving it to our kids. Now we just want to be happy, right? We want to enjoy our retirement. I want you to think about, if you're not yet retired, what kind of life do you want this money to support? $5 million can support a lot of lifestyle. So what does that lifestyle look for you? If you're not retired yet, don't spend time focusing on what you're retiring from. Think about what you're retiring to, right? What are you passionate about? What purpose do you want to serve for the next 30 years of your retirement? What kind of pleasure do you want to enjoy? Think about those things. Where do you want to live? That's a really big one. What kind of travel do you want to do? What does it look like? What does a meaningful week look like? Sit down and write out your ideal week. Monday, when I wake up at 7 a.m., or maybe you're retired, you're going to sleep till 9 a.m., figure out exactly what your perfect week looks like and spell it out so that you have that target in your mind. And think about, what is a Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. when I'm normally working? Like, what am I doing during that time? And you don't have to fill in every block. You can fill in a block with relax and watch TV for 2 hours. That may be something that's really important to you, is just not have things to have to do. That's fine. But just make sure you're proactive in thinking about it, thinking it through, because retiring to something is just as important as retiring from something. Money will provide, this $5 million will provide the support you need in retirement, but it does not create purpose itself. Money is a tool, just like time is a tool. These are resources. How are we going to maximize these resources? We spent a lot of the time on this podcast talking about how to maximize the money. Now, how are we going to maximize the time? And the time, the chunks of time that we have of our life, is really the sum of which really do create our life. So we've talked about all 10. $5 million goes a long way, Zane.
It definitely does. And I completely agree with you. Really compares to your overall goals. What life do you want to lead, as Ryan was saying? Do you want to live that comfortable retirement lifestyle? Do you want to have regular, consistent travel, strong flexibility in spending? Things like, do you want to snowbird? Do you want to own a second home? Significant giving and charitable giving is also something that we typically see in people with $5 million. But one thing to definitely keep in mind is the things that it might not support, which are unlimited spending. If you're to spend more than you make, you will run out of money. I can tell you that right now. So that's something that you definitely want to keep in mind when you are either retired or preparing for your retirement. It's also important to keep in mind that you have your finances in place. This is where something like a financial planner would come very much in handy. Keeping your finances in place so you don't run the risk of running out of money is also very key.
And really, it's important that we end this with a congratulations. If you're listening to this because you have $5 million in investable assets and you're thinking about retirement, or you are retired and just want to learn how to maximize and optimize, I want to congratulate you. This is a significant milestone. You've reached a very significant place that a lot of people have not. Some people have retired, but they've retired on far less. It's a lot of money, and you are setting yourselves up for a very comfortable retirement. So I want you to enjoy it. But remember that money itself does not provide the fulfillment. Make smart decisions using the 10 components of our GPS planning system, and you will live the retirement of your dreams. And as always, remember, our goal here at Zenergy is to simplify retirement complexity. So if you do have questions, if you want to learn more, feel free to reach out. We're glad to help you in any way we can. But in the meantime, keep learning and keep planning.
Thank you for listening to Retirement GPS, navigated by Zenergy. To explore today's topic further, visit our blog mile markers at zenergyretirement.com/blog, where we offer detailed strategies, examples, and downloadable tools to support your retirement journey. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at Zenergy Retirement Planning for weekly insights, checklists, and planning reminders. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share it with someone planning for their future. Until next time, keep navigating toward a confident retirement. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as investment, legal, or tax advice. Listeners should consult their own financial, tax, and legal advisors before making any decisions. Zenergy Retirement Planning is a registered investment advisor located in Red Bank, New Jersey.